What did you make of the fight, Moses?
Personally, I think the fight went exactly how I thought it was going to be. Like, obviously, Joe was just kind of taking a lot of shots. The key aspect that he always gets shined a light on is his chin, and that's what obviously shown. But then I was contemplating to myself whether actually Hrgovic is a big puncher or not, because I'm like, although Joyce has a good chin, like, he has been decked by Chisora. He has, do you know what I mean? He's been knocked out by Zhang twice, which obviously Zhang is a big puncher. So I was like, I was thinking, like, is Hrgovic a big puncher or not? And then, yeah, personally, I thought Hrgovic just smashed it. And then I was sitting there watching the scorecards, and I saw Carl Frampton, he had Joe Joyce up by 1 round in round 7 or something like that. I said, am I watching the same fight as everyone else? And then when the fight ended, I was sitting next to Dillian Whyte, and he said, Joyce surely won that. And I'm thinking, like,
I'm in the same space.
I said, where, like, I thought Hrgovic won every single round, so I was...
So you didn't have an issue? Because I didn't have an issue with the Whyte scorecard. Your dad did, Francis, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And, you know, I think different people like different things. And I think, obviously, my dad liked Joyce's work more than yourselves. But, you know, but he definitely thought that it was closer. I mean, I thought that Hrgovic clearly won it.
Yes,
honestly, truthfully.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's not to say that Joe wasn't in the fight at some points, but for any of them, it was a close round. I thought Hrgovic nicked it.
Well, let's have a look. I mean, we see a lot of Joe Joyce. I saw a lot of Joe Joyce eating right hands. So let's have a look at some of the VT courtesy of DAZN from Saturday night.
Yeah,
and we're seeing it, Spence, aren't we?
Yeah, like you, Simon, I saw Joe Joyce eating far too many right hands. I mean, Hrgovic had a game plan, and he stuck to that game plan, and it was working for him. Joe Joyce does what he does best, and that is just steamrolls forward. But at some point, you know, you've got to say to yourself, look, mate, you've got to start moving your head. He was trying to do that. Even when he was leaning back and those right hands weren't landing clean, they were still landing. And for me, I think that Joe Joyce was taking far too much punishment. I'm like you, Simon. I think that the fight was clear-cut, like Moses did as well. I thought that, you know, it was, I think I had it 97, 93, 97, 93, the scorecards were. I think he was in control all the time.
Well, we scored it, you and I did 97, 93.
Yeah.
Some of the scorecards was 98, 92, and I can make that case.
Yeah.
I can make that case.
I can as well, and I think that, look, Joe Joyce, yes, he had a good 7th round, and was that the case of just Filip Hrgovic taking his foot off the gas a little bit? He's stuck in the corner, he was waiting there. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was in control of the situation the whole time, and he was just trying to set things up because he knew that when he threw those shots, he couldn't miss. You know, Joe Joyce has been an unbelievable servant to the sport of boxing. You know, he's done brilliantly as an amateur. He's done brilliantly as a professional. He's now 39 years of age, and that was my concern when I spoke up about it.
You were joined by Paul Smith, who I think is a great voice in commentary. Let's have a listen to what Paul Smith was saying about it.
He just takes too much punishment, Paul. He does, and as I said before, and I'm going to say it again now, I hope I never see Joe Joyce in a boxing ring again. And I'm not criticising him, I'm not having a go at him, it's not being cruel or unkind or harsh to him. I'm saying it for him, for Joe Joyce, because at the moment there doesn't seem to be anyone else around him that's willing to say it to him, because tonight that was not Joe Joyce that we all know, apart from the just coming forward and taking shots. He looks slower than what he usually is. He got caught a lot more in that fight than he usually does. And of someone of Filip Hrgovic's level also, it was very uncomfortable for me watching that, and we're wincing when shots are landing, and it's his health that we're all worried about, and this is an unforgiving sport, boxing.
Francis, what do you make to Paul Smith's comments? I know that you want to probably tread delicately, and so did your father, was diplomatic about what Joe Joyce should and shouldn't do. But when you listen to Paul Smith lay it out in that fashion, what do you make of that?
Well, Paul's an ex-fighter.
Yeah.
So obviously his opinion is extremely valid, and has his own personal opinion as well. Probably as a fighter who's been in that situation, and recognises the time when it's the time to step into a different to finish your career. I just want to say it's not just the defeats that I think we need to look at in Joe Joyce's career.
Yep.
You know, throughout his career, Joe has been a come-forward fighter. I mean, the Parker fight stand out for me in one where he was an absolute warrior, an absolute hero, and come through, and Joe was as well, even in defeat.
And he took a lot against Daniel Dubois in that fight behind closed doors.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's the way Joe Joyce has boxed. It's the way that, you know, he's always been come forward. You know, he doesn't move his head a lot, but the fact is he was capable of pulling out big shots and ending fights himself. just watching that Hrgovic highlight reel, and it was a Hrgovic highlight reel, there wasn't any highlights there for Joe Joyce. Joe was throwing shots back and they were going nowhere near Filip Hrgovic at all.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not an ex-fighter. I haven't boxed. There's not criticism. It's just I can only go on what I see. And Joe Joyce, a lovely fella he is, and the fantastic accolades he's had throughout his career, he should really be sitting down with his family and having a real hard look.
Francis,
at what
I think you highlighted it there, mate. When you go back to September 2022, when he boxed Joseph Parker, that was a different Joe Joyce. There was more intensity in his work, and the juggernaut done what it said on the tin. Yes, he was taking shots, but he was very effective at landing shots. He wasn't effective at landing shots there. You can see that he's sort of half holding back a little bit now, maybe not believing in himself like he did before, and taking those shots. And like when you take that away from it, you just say at what cost, at what point do you need to sit down and have that conversation? Like I say, it's like because it's been fight after fight after fight that he's been through that. And it's clear now that the deterioration is there. So we're saying it's not a dig at Joe Joyce, by the way. It's, I think that what he's achieved is fantastic. But you have to go, the people close around him now need to have that serious conversation. Sit down and say, look, Joe, there is life after boxing. And there's another avenue to take. And that's what you've got to consider.
I mean, it's the old adage in boxing is it's hit and don't get hit.
Yeah.
And now he's getting hit and not hitting. And if Joe was sitting next to me, this isn't, Joe, he probably will see this. This isn't a dig at all. But I just think that there are times when guys need to realise that, maybe when he watches it back, he'll think to himself, maybe there's people
what do you
around
think,
that I should
it's difficult. I mean, I know that you sparred with him when you were quite young, and so you will have known him. And you will have a sort of an affinity with fellow fighters. When you hear the commentary sort of reverberating around whether he should retire or not retire, what do you think of that?
Personally, I don't like to tell people that, what to do with their life. For example, Joe Joyce, people don't know the situation. He might be outside the ring, and it's very hard for people to retire when you're doing this for so long and you've created a habit. It's kind of hard to get out of it, and I get it. It's kind of addicting, this sport.
Well, that's the point, Moses, right? Well, like you say there, the fighter's the last one to know. He thinks, right, I'll have one more fight. And that's the way that fighters think. That's the way that they're programmed, right? But what I'm saying is, at Joe's stage of his career, which is a completely stage to where you're at, he needs that support from the people around him to say, look, have that serious word with him and say, look, we need to reconsider where we're at.
I understand that, but the only way I would only really see or tell Joe Joyce is to retire is because at one point he was ranked very high with governing bodies, and it don't even look like he can beat the top 10 guys anymore. So it's the peak's gone, the prime's gone, everything's kind of gone, and there is no way you can really go.
Well, that's the point. He gets then used as a pawn because of the name and the position that he was able to say guys like you, the guys coming through.
If he's happy to do that, he's happy to do that.
That's his choice.
Yeah.
That's right. Difficult question to ask someone at the beginning of their career about someone at the end of their career.
Sure.
When you look at Hrgovic, Spence, where do you think he goes next? I've always had mixed emotions about Hrgovic. I think he lost to Zhilei Zhang in the first fight. I think he was fortunate to get away with that. I think he was lacklustre in various fights and fighters that he's gone on and demolished at a later stage. Hrgovic has now put himself back in the mix. 6, 8, 9, 10 months ago, before the Dubois fight, telling everyone he was going to school Dubois, he was the guy that people thought were going to pick up the IBF belt.
Yeah.
And he's now gone through this redemption. He's gone in with Joe Joyce, a Joe Joyce that's been vanquished twice by Zhilei Zhang, beaten by Derek Chisora. So not the same Joe Joyce that beat Joseph Parker, despite Joe Parker telling us that he wasn't very well for that fight. It was still an impressive performance of the guy that beat Daniel Dubois. Where now for Hrgovic? Where's he going now?
Great question. Well, for Filip Hrgovic, he's put himself right back in the mix because of that victory. And you go, but he's not that top
near him,
tier.
though, right?
That's where I was going, mate. I say when you're talking about obvious steps for someone like Moses Itauma, you go, Filip Hrgovic is that guy. When you look at stylistically, the way that he fights. Where does Filip go? What options has Filip got? So he's either going to get put in with one of those top tier guys now off that victory and get beat, or he's going to have to box someone like Moses, and that's the situation. That's where he's at. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place because he's not good enough for the top level guys. And for someone like Moses, you go, this is a great test for this young man.
We'll ask Moses a bit later on when we start talking about what he's going to do about Hrgovic. But let's also talk about another fight coming up, which your dad has made, which is obviously Jarrell Miller versus Fabio Wardley. Again, on DAZN, another good card. Interesting fight, interesting set of circumstances yesterday.
I think it's a terrific fight. And it's exciting. It was always going to be lively yesterday. Not condoning, obviously, the over-the-top argy-bargy, but, it was, that these two guys are definitely going to bring it. It's, home advantage for Fabio, his boyhood football club at Portman Road, which gives him an extra impetus. And Jerome Miller read the script and put a Norwich shirt on. So, I think it was a great move and got a little bit out of hand. And, we need to see a bit less of this at the moment. But it's a terrific fight night. And I think for Ipswich to get that, to get a big show there, I think it's fantastic.
Actually, to get a win at home ground as well would be useful for them. It would be a rare thing, wouldn't it? When you see that sort of stuff, I mean, I get all the trash talking. I like all the theatre and all the spectacle, Moses. I think it's quite interesting, and sometimes you get some interesting insights. And then there's other times where I think it's just unnecessary. I'm not a fan of Joe Miller's. I don't admire some of his outbursts. And I thought some of the stuff that came out of his mouth yesterday was completely unnecessary. And I thought Fabio conducted himself relatively well. When you see that, what sort of reaction does it bring out in you? And what would you do if you was on the receiving end of some of that?
It's some people's cup of teas and there's some people not. There's a lot, you got to remember, your view on boxing might be completely different on what a normal guy's view on boxing. They like that nitty-gritty, right hair, he said, she said.
Sure.
So...
I do too, but there was a point. And for you, if you was on the receiving end, okay, let me drill it down. If you was on the receiving end of what Fabio Wardley was on yesterday, which was a whole barrage of abuse, accusations, and then getting a bit physical, what would you do?
It don't matter. It just
don't care?
It don't matter. It's not gonna win no fight, no nothing. So
Not phase you in the slightest.
So
not affect you. Not irritate
of course,
you.
it might get under my skin if you say certain words, but it's not gonna affect the outcome of the fight. So it just doesn't
Mm.
matter. I'm not really. There's trash talkers, and then there's just people that
can deliver.
Exactly, and I want to be one of them guys that deliver. That's why I don't really like talking too much.
Fair enough. Who do you think is going to win the fight? Company line.
If you want my honest opinion, yeah, obviously it kind of does favour more to Jamel Miller, only because you got the experience and XYZ. But I'm not right. I don't ever write off Fabio with no one. He can whack. Do you get what I mean? So he's always going to have that chance. But what you lot got to remember is Fabio's only started boxing a couple of years ago. Jamel Miller's been doing this for some time. And he's always going to have that puncher's chance. So obviously the favour is in Jamel Miller, but I ain't writing Fabio off.